Avantika Goswami. I'm the program manager for climate change at the Center for Science and Environment. And do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Akshit Sangomla. I'm a correspondent with the Down to Earth magazine. I cover climate change science and policy for them.
So today we're going to talk about the Bonn Climate Conference. This is the mid-year climate negotiations facilitated by the United Nations, in which many countries of the world participate. This conference is kind of a precursor to the main at the end of the year, the COP Climate Summit. So this year, the Bonn conference is happening in an interesting world environment. Over the past couple of years, we've gone through a global pandemic. We are still in the midst of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which hasn't shown any signs of an end so far. The world has been reeling from the after effects of these multiple crises. I feel like polycrisis is a term that is extremely popular at the moment. But no doubt the impacts of these multiple crises have led to high energy costs, inflation, food prices, multiple supply chain crises around the world. So it is in this context that we're trying to figure out the best way to kind of make progress on our climate goals. And also very key this year, since COP27 last year, the IPCC published its synthesis report from the sixth assessment cycle. And it had some positive updates in terms of progress on renewable energy technologies, dropping costs of multiple technologies. But on the other hand, it simply reiterated the urgency that we currently face with needing to halve global emissions by 2030 if we are to adhere to the Paris Agreement's 1.5C goal. So that's kind of the background setting amidst which we are going into the Bonn Climate Conference. At COP27 last year, there was what is considered as a pretty significant win for developing countries. The G77 and China bloc achieved the establishment of a loss and damage fund, which is a fight that went on for 30 years and more. I mean, the details of that will be hashed out this year, as Akshit will talk about in a minute. There were some other less promising outcomes. So at COP27, India proposed that language around the phase down of fossil fuels be included in the final decision text, but that didn't make it in. So COP27 essentially reiterated the previous commitment from Glasgow on phase down of unabated coal power and phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. Interestingly, COP27 did establish a new work program on just transition, which is intended to be focused on the communities, people who are dependent on the fossil fuel sector for their livelihoods, and what their future should look like. How should that be managed in a just and equitable way? So those discussions are due to start in Bonn this year. So I think that's the overall context with which we're going into Bonn. So Akshit, I'll hand over to you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about a couple of the big developments that are expected to be discussed at Bonn.
Sure. So basically, one of the most important things that's going to happen this year is the global stocktake, which is kind of a report card on where we are at regarding climate action, different aspects of climate action like mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, finance and technological support. So global stocktake is basically a 2-year process, which is going to culminate this year at COP28. The technical phase of this global stocktake is going to end in Bonn. And from there on, the political phase of GST will begin. And so this is basically in the technical phase of the GST. nations have basically collected and analyzed many documents, multiple documents, thousands of documents, in fact, from all over, from all the countries of the world regarding their NDCs, their national adaptation plans, and other documents related, other inputs related to basically climate action. And through that, they have there'll be an assessment of where countries are at, and this assessment will be decided upon at COP28, and then this would the entire process has been put in place as a ratchet mechanism, basically to increase ambition from countries here on, because so we have to be in line with meeting the Paris Agreement goals of of our temperature rise, of global temperature rise being keeping it under 1.5 degrees Celsius, and so in terms of mitigation, in terms of adaptation, in terms of finance that is available for climate action, and technological support that is available, we'll be able to increase ambition, and we'll be able to move forward. So that is the thing with GST this year. And next, I would like to talk about loss and damage, which was one of the most important outcomes of COP27.
Right.
And it was a big win, as you said, for G77 in China and for the entire world, for the developing world in specific, and especially for the vulnerable countries like the Pacific Island nations, who are continuously facing these extreme weather events, which are causing a lot of loss and damage in these countries.
Island nations, as well as a number of middle-income countries as well, who are extremely vulnerable and very highly exposed to climate risk, including India as well.
Yeah, true. So basically, after the loss and damage fund was established, in the decision text, the transitional committee was to be formed, which was formed around March. And there have been 2 transitional committee meetings that have been already held, and 1 workshop that has been held. And so this transitional committee consists of 24 members, 14 members from developing countries, and 10 members from developed nations. And so through these, at Bonn, what is going to happen regarding loss and damage is the second Glasgow dialogue, which is where parties will come together and discuss what has happened till now with the with the proceedings of the transitional committee meetings and the workshop, and how to move forward from here. So this is a very important phase for loss and damage negotiations, because in the 2 transitional committee meetings, especially in the second one, there have been some divergent views emerging, because the developed countries want to focus more on funding arrangements outside the UNFCCC.
Right.
For instance, the Global Shield, which is mostly an
insurance-based scheme.
Insurance-based scheme, and where a lot of private players will come in, and again will go back to loans and those kind of things.
Right.
And the developing countries want basically the focus to be on the fund itself, and it being an oversight there being an oversight mechanism which should be put in place as part of the fund. And they also want most of the funding coming in to be of scale, and also in the form of grants.
Right.
So that is what is going to be talked about at the Glasgow dialogue, most probably, and at Bonn, and also in the 2 more transitional committee meetings that are going to come up, and also the workshop.
Right. Yeah. Interestingly, loss and damage as one of the pillars of climate action, it's one area in which you absolutely have no possibility of a return on investment. So any money that goes towards loss and damage necessarily has to be in the form of grants. It cannot be in the form of loans. All of these discussions around private sector involvement in areas like this, even in adaptation for that matter, it's very difficult to really get a return on adaptation projects. They are typically more like public goods, which require public investment and grant-based money. So those are some of really the fights that are going to be advancing this year.
So also on adaptation, there's going to be the 6th workshop of the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh workshop. Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh workshop on global goal on adaptation.
Glass on GGA. Yeah, that's a tongue twister.
Yeah, so that's going to happen. That's the 6th workshop. The 5th workshop happened around March. And in that, I think a lot of discussions happened around the knowledge that indigenous people have already have regarding climate adaptation and how people should go about it.
Right.
And now in this one, it's mostly going to be about metrics, deciding upon metrics and indicators for a framework of global goal on adaptation.
Okay.
So the framework was already established at the COP27. That was one of the outcomes of COP27. But now the discussions are going to go forward, and so this is another thing that's going to happen at Bonn.
Right. Within adaptation, there's always the question of financing. So a goal was committed at COP26 to double adaptation finance by 2025. So countries will definitely want to see accountability on that commitment. So with that, we segue actually into finance, which at least in our overall opinion, that's the theme of the year. It's cross-cutting. This year is all about the money, as we're talking about it. So it's finance for loss and damage, finance for mitigation, doubling of finance for adaptation, ambitious progress on the negotiations around the new collective quantified goal, the NCQG. So the NCQG is essentially the next climate finance target that countries will come up with. The previous target was this number of $100 billion, which was conceptualized in 2009, but $100 billion was not a negotiated number, nor was it reflective of the real needs of countries in the global south, countries who are climate vulnerable. So in Bonn, there's going to be the 6th technical expert dialogue on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. And the hope is by 2025 to have agreement on what a new goal should look like. There are various nuances within this. For example, the LMDC block of which India is a part, they've made a submission which says that the quantity of money should be determined based on the needs and priorities of developing countries using a bottom-up approach. India particularly has made a submission, very important. India in its capacity as a country has actually said that the ad hoc work program on NCQG should focus on a clear definition of climate finance. Without it, tracking climate finance flows is challenging and leads to uneven data and reporting. Now, this is a huge issue. I mean, after decades of negotiations on climate finance, there isn't one particular agreed upon mandated definition. In fact, there was an excellent analysis published yesterday by Reuters about how a lot of the climate finance that has been transferred by developed countries to developing countries and has been, well, transferred is the wrong word, that has been reported to the UNFCCC, has gone for some very interesting uses. So they talk about how some money has gone towards opening Italian chocolate shops and towards funding the making of a film about rainforests by, I think it's Belgium, but I will cross-check. And all of this is because there isn't a clear definition of what climate finance should be. And hence, a lot of liberties are taken in terms of what is then reported as climate finance. So interestingly, though, developed countries are saying that this is the year that the 100 billion goal will be met, according to their estimations and reporting. This May, at the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, Germany and other countries made this announcement that the goal is likely to be met. But the problem is that today we're at a phase or stage where 100 billion is vastly underestimating the true need. So last year, the Stern-Songway report commissioned by the COP27 presidency actually talks about $1 trillion per year will be needed in external climate finance by 2030 for emerging and developing economies other than China. So the needs have now vastly increased beyond $100 billion. So the achievement of the goal this year is too little, too late, is what we believe. So the NCQG discussions will be very important from that perspective to work towards a truly ambitious 2025 goal. And finally, I think I would like to talk about the mitigation work program. Mitigation is an important pillar of climate action. The mitigation work program is a very interesting area of negotiations, at least in my view. I really enjoy the discussions under it. The program was established at COP26 in Glasgow. And the mitigation work program, it started off in a bit of a bizarre phase. At least this was my reading, having sat in on the negotiations at Bonn last year, at COP last year, and then hopefully observing them this year as well. Initially, there was a lot of resistance from developing countries who felt that the mitigation work program is a replication of the GST. How is it different from GST? Is it going to place new demands and new top-down targets on us over and above what the NDCs are already making us commit? So there was definitely a lot of hesitation, suspicion. Over time, however, I think the mitigation work program has shifted. And over the past year, particularly, the conversation around the energy transition has really escalated. The energy transition, we have always known that at some point, very soon, we have to shift over from fossil-based economies to an economy powered by zero carbon energy. The energy transition now is discussed much more in the context of the just energy transition or an equitable energy transition. So poor developing countries, they need to switch over to renewable power, but currently it's not affordable in many parts of the world. The IEA shows that renewable energy investment has grown much faster than fossil-based investment in recent years, but it's heavily concentrated in just a few areas. So the top 3 areas are the US, European Union, and China. That leaves a vast part of the developing world, the global south, where renewable-based power is still not affordable. High cost of capital and a number of other barriers are the reason for that. So I think the mitigation work program is now kind of morphed into this very constructive space where we believe countries should lay out their needs. Developing countries should talk about the barriers that they are facing to scale up clean energy, scale up clean technologies, scale up industrial decarbonization. And they should lay out their financing and technological requirements within the space that this work program is providing. And then it's really the onus is on developed countries, on multilateral development banks, multilateral institutions to then look for ways to finance those needs and enable this energy transition in the developing world. So in Bonn, the mitigation work program is going to have a global dialogue, the first of its kind, and it's going to have an investment-focused event, which is very interesting, very curious to see how that plays out. The co-facilitators have set the topic for 2023 as accelerating a just energy transition, which is wonderful to set the tone for the very important discussions that must be had this year. So I think those are some of the big headers. Akshit and I will both be at the Bonn conference, and we have many more colleagues here at CSE Down to Earth who will be observing, following, reporting from here. So we will keep providing updates and analysis. Any final words?
No, I think that's about it. That's it.
Okay, cool. Thanks everyone for watching.